There was an unspoken weight in those words, a recognition of the path Jake had walked. Jake straightened his back slightly more. "Yes, sir. Just doing my job." Trump exhaled, almost as if he was processing something deeper. Then, instead of simply nodding and moving on, he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Jake hesitated for just a second before grasping it. The handshake was firm, deliberate. "You're not just doing your job," Trump said. "You're standing watch." That's more important than most people realize. Jake had heard words of appreciation before, but this felt different. It wasn't just empty gratitude. There was something behind it, something genuine. Before he could respond, Trump reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small card, and handed it to him. "Come see me tomorrow," he said simply. And with that, he turned and walked into the building, leaving Jake standing there, gripping the card as if it were the key to a door he never thought he'd be invited to walk through. What had just happened? Jake looked down at the card, his pulse quickening. His name wasn't even printed on it, but he knew it was meant for him. This was no ordinary meeting offer. This was something different, something bigger. The next day, Jake arrived at Trump Tower, unsure of what to expect. He was greeted at the entrance and escorted to a private office on the top floor. As the doors opened, he stepped inside, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on him. Trump was waiting, seated behind a massive desk, watching him with that same analytical gaze from the night before. "You served your country," Trump said, leaning forward. "Now, I want to offer you something new." Jake's mind raced. What could this be? A security job? A personal assignment? Something even bigger? Whatever it was, one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. Situation could have escalated beyond control. A cyber breach? An espionage attempt? The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone in the room. Jake's instincts screamed at him. This was no coincidence. He had spent weeks analyzing the security system, identifying weak points, and now one of those very spots was being exploited? That wasn't luck. That was premeditated. Trump's gaze flickered between Jake and the flashing monitors. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice sharp but controlled. Jake clenched his jaw. "I recognized the location. It was one of the vulnerabilities I mentioned in my report. The breach happened exactly where I predicted it might." For a moment, silence filled the room, save for the distant footsteps of security personnel sweeping the area. Then, Trump did something unexpected. He let out a quiet, approving chuckle, shaking his head slightly as if he had just confirmed something he already suspected. "You don't just see problems," Trump said, his voice measured. "You see solutions before they happen." Jake remained silent, not knowing how to respond. Was this praise? A test? What was Trump thinking? The security team continued their search, but the intruder had vanished. However, the discovery of the surveillance device was enough proof that something bigger was at play. This was not just a random event, it was deliberate. Someone had tried to infiltrate one of the most secure buildings in the country. And Jake, an ordinary security guard, had been the one to spot it first. Trump turned to one of his aides, his expression shifting from intrigue to decision-making. "I want him in that meeting. Make sure it happens." Jake's breath caught. What meeting? With who? He barely had time to process before Trump faced him again. "You've got a sharp mind," Trump said. "And you're wasted standing at that door." Jake swallowed hard. Was this real? The next morning, Jake found himself standing outside an exclusive boardroom inside Trump Tower. He had barely slept, his mind racing with everything that had unfolded. He wasn't just a security guard anymore, at least not in Trump's eyes. When the doors opened, he was ushered inside. The room was filled with high-ranking security officials, private contractors, and people Jake never imagined he'd be sitting across from. And yet here he was. Trump sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding as always. "Jake," he said, gesturing toward an empty seat, "tell them what you told me." Jake took a deep breath. He was no politician, no executive, no high-ranking official. But he had experience. He had insight. And, most importantly, for the first time in a long time, he had a voice that people were actually listening to. As he began to speak, laying out his findings, his observations, his solutions. The room listened. They didn't dismiss him. They didn't ignore him. Because, in that moment, he wasn't just a security guard. He was the man who had stopped a breach before it even happened. And that changed everything. Donald Trump notices a struggling guard. His next move leaves the entire nation stunned. Each night, clad in his dark blue uniform, Jake Thompson silently stood in front of a towering government building. A security guard by profession but a soldier at heart, he had once served on the battlefield, carrying the discipline and responsibility ingrained in him through years of military service. He was a ghost among powerful figures, unnoticed, unacknowledged. But one fateful night, everything changed when Donald Trump crossed his path. Their initial encounter was brief, a polite nod, nothing more. But what followed altered Jake's destiny in ways he could never have foreseen. A challenge he hadn't anticipated, an unexpected opportunity, a single decision that could either lift him out of obscurity or bury him further in insignificance. What exactly did Trump see in Jake? And what happened that left the entire nation in disbelief? Jake's night shifts were always grueling. Starting at 9 p.m. and lasting until sunrise, he walked the long, cold hallways, his footsteps echoing through the silence. Locked doors shielded the rooms where the nation's most critical decisions were made. Every inch of the vast government building was under his watch, yet he remained nothing more than a nameless protector. The people inside shaped history, while he merely guarded it. For 8 years, Jake had served in the military, enduring harsh deployments in the Middle East. But upon returning home, he realized the world had moved on without him. Soldiers once hailed as heroes were now mere footnotes, acknowledged in speeches, but forgotten in reality. No job prospects, no opportunities to apply his hard-earned skills. His role as a security guard paid the bills, but it offered no future. Night after night, he saluted politicians and powerful businessmen, silently wondering, if life had taken a slightly different turn, could he have been one of them? Yet, like always, he lowered his head, stayed in position, and fulfilled his duty. He had no idea that in a matter of hours, his life would take a turn he never saw coming. At the stroke of midnight, a convoy of sleek black vehicles glided into the courtyard. Headlights illuminated the pavement, reflecting off towering glass windows. Jake didn't need a second look. He knew exactly who was arriving. The man had visited before, yet never once had he acknowledged Jake's presence. But this time, Donald Trump stopped. He looked Jake straight in the eye. Jake snapped to attention as the convoy reached the entrance. The car door swung open, and within seconds, a team of Secret Service agents formed a protective perimeter. Then, Trump emerged, his sharp black suit exuding power and confidence. Jake had seen him walk into this building countless times, but something about tonight felt different. As Trump approached the entrance, he suddenly paused and turned toward Jake. "How's your night going, officer?" For a fraction of a second, Jake hesitated. In all his years working security, no one of Trump's stature had ever asked him that. He quickly composed himself. "All good, sir." Trump nodded but didn't move on. Instead, he studied Jake, his gaze analytical, as if seeing something even Jake hadn't recognized in himself. "You served in the military, didn't you?" Jake blinked in surprise. There were no medals, no insignia, nothing visibly marking his past. Only his posture, squared shoulders, and the disciplined way he carried himself. Trump had noticed. "Yes, sir. 8 years in the Army." Trump nodded again, his expression thoughtful. 8 years, that's a long time. And now you're here. A tightness formed in Jake's chest. Trump wasn't mocking him, but saying the words out loud stung. After everything, he was just a security guard. "I handle security for this building, sir." Trump's gaze sharpened, then his lips curled into a small, knowing smile, not condescending, but as if he had just discovered something intriguing. "Tell me, do you think this building is truly secure?" Jake hesitated. Was this a test? It wasn't the kind of question most people dared to answer. "I believe we do our best to keep it safe, sir." Trump tilted his head slightly. Doing your best doesn't always mean it's enough. If you had the power to change the security system here, what would you do differently? Jake fell silent. He had countless ideas, weak spots, vulnerabilities, areas that needed improvement. But who was he to make suggestions? Yet at this moment, Trump wasn't just someone powerful, he was someone who was actually listening. There are a few areas that could be improved, sir. Trump gave a slight nod, a knowing look in his eyes. Good. I'll be back soon. When I want to hear your thoughts. Jake could hardly believe his ears. Did Trump actually want his opinion? The opinion of an unremarkable security guard? Before he could even process what had happened, Trump had disappeared into the building, leaving Jake standing there, his mind racing. Was it just small talk? Or was he serious? For the first time in years, Jake felt visible. He knew this might be his one and only chance to prove himself. For weeks, he stayed late after his shifts, quietly studying security protocols, taking notes on weaknesses he had observed. Blind spots in cameras, unsecured checkpoints, access routes that could be exploited. He researched modern security technologies, brushing up on advancements in threat detection. If Trump was serious, Jake wouldn't be caught unprepared. Then, 3 weeks later, Trump returned. As he passed by, he stopped. I told you to prepare some ideas, didn't I? Jake took a deep breath, heart pounding. Yes, sir. Good. Let's hear them. Jake was ready. He laid out the security vulnerabilities, blind spots, and weak areas that could be exploited. He detailed solutions, practical, effective, realistic. His voice was steady, each word chosen carefully. There wouldn't be a second chance. Trump listened in silence. Behind him, Secret Service agents exchanged glances. No one had expected such a sharp analysis from a regular security guard. When Jake finished, Trump nodded slowly. I like the way you think. Before Jake could react, Trump turned to an aide. Set up a meeting. I want to see what he's capable of. A meeting? What did that even mean? Jake had no time to process it, because that very night, something happened that would change everything. At exactly 2 a.m., the security alarm blared. Red lights flashed.